Good afternoon. Thank you for spending some time with poetry and with me. Thank you, West Caldwell Library and Ethan Galvin, for making these readings a gift to the community during this time of public distancing. And thank you, Diane Lockwood, for all your support in this project. My name is Sandra Duguid, and I have lived in New Jersey since the early 1980s. My original home is in western New York State, between Buffalo and Rochester, in the country, between those two cities. I'm a retired college English teacher, having focused on American literature and writing, both composition and creative writing, especially poetry. And I've taught for over 25 years in the New York, New Jersey metropolitan area. Poetry has always been a love, and I have a book of poetry published, which is entitled Pails Scrubbed Silver. Here's a picture of it. Henry's drawing is on the front of the cover. So that was happy. Pails Scrubbed Silver is the name of the book. And most of the poems I'm reading today are in that collection. My first poem is called simply Bee, and was inspired by the blossoming of a flowering pear tree in these suburbs. I was feeling a little anxious one day driving my car, and I looked over into someone's lawn and saw this beautiful flowering pear tree, and I said, why don't you be like that instead? Be like that. So here is a poem called Bee. Bee, a body enspaced. Excuse me, I'm going to start again. Bee, a body in space, dimensional, like the flowering pear that sets to right suburbs in spring. Trunks focus, sun spills, be light in wide diffusion against those slats of cloud. What shapes nothing takes among the white blossoms, breathe, recede, see now what wind begins to blow. Okay, the next poem is called Trek and describes a nightly winter trek in western New York State. It's a poem about my father. And the word Kendall in it, some of you may know. Kendall was a kind of a gas pump that you used to see all over in the country, and a kind of gasoline, Kendall gasoline. So that was just outside the store. And here is a poem called Trek. The word 9 in the poem, first line, refers to either myself at 9 years old or the time of day, 9 o'clock p.m. Okay, Trek. Winter nights, 9, I helped my blind father lock up our store. The right click in the door by twin gas pumps, their white-red globes Kendall. Angle around cars in our icy parking lot, then walk to our house on the path, shoveled through high drifts, caramel-colored money bag hung from his wrist. Moonlight on an endless stretch of snow, and the white crossed beams of our clothes pole. Okay, this has been a momentous last 4 months in our country, and a momentous last 2 weeks. It's difficult to grasp all that's been going on. So many changes happening in our world and in our culture. These next two poems are responses to suffering and to racism in particular. The first poem refers to our country soon after the shooting death of African immigrant Amadou Diallo in the Bronx by 4 policemen several years ago. The poem also references horrible shootings in schools that were taking place at that time as well. And this poem also alludes to Jesus walking unrecognized with two disciples on the road to Emmaus just after his resurrection. But it's set in the present day in the voice of a contemporary pilgrim. And the poem is called Road to Emmaus. Okay, Road to Emmaus. There have been crucifixions, too, in our town. innocents gunned down in their doorways or in school halls, or radiation's black outlines, 3 crosses marked a sister's chest. No wonder we walk in quiet rage, musing. And who on this road will join us, seeming unaware of the worst news in the neighborhood, but spelling out the history of the prophets and a future? Ought not Christ to have suffered these things and to enter into his glory? Could our hearts still burn within us? Will we ask the stranger to stay, break bread? And how will our well-hammered and nailed kitchens and bedrooms appear to us when we understand who he is, just as he steals away? And this second poem on racism is a dramatic monologue, and it takes place in the Caribbean, in Barbados, and it's spoken by a young black woman, a tour guide, throughout the poem, and she's very critical of the house, of the plantation house, and of the history she's describing to tourists. And it's called "A Guide Leads a Tour of the Plantation House in Barbados, Built in 1650." Okay, she begins. A guide leads a tour of the plantation house in Barbados, built in 1650. Correct. It's the oldest house on the island, once a master's. Most, you'll understand I say, thankfully, of the original structure is gone. The cast iron kitchen, the back laundry room, those white beams above us, their fussy molding, never my taste, remains. 3-foot walls still make good insulation. Wine cooler, sideboard in the dining room to your left. Yes, the 17th century pieces you find interesting. The china setting is later. The tables are native mahogany, Barbadian. That's one of 3 fireplaces the English laid before they realized we didn't need them. Striking, the bold bouquets, orange, mauve, pink hibiscus from our gardens. I make them every day. Hibiscus last just that long, outside, in. No beauty's lost in picking them. And here in this room, our shop, this inventory behind glass lists slaves. All had to be accounted for. Children, the disabled, those too old to work. See, Lucy's listed worth $20, and these as 0. See those articles there on the mannequin? The gray dress and large pocketed apron worn by a slave? I came to work early one day last week and tried them on. No, of course I'm not allowed. I can't tell you the weakness I felt, then rage. I felt like a vapor. Can you imagine endless days here when this breeze would not cool? God's sun not shine for your pleasure? Right, it's difficult. Let's move along. In this next room, the large den, rests a gentleman's chair, last century. You can see how a man could sidle in here, put up his feet, sit, read his morning paper, and later prop his book on this rack, and to stack his tray, order lunch or tea, and anything else he wanted from the women servants. My great-grandmothers passed down stories I begin to understand now. Here's a picture of the present owner, plus 6 generations before him. We used to show his room upstairs, but tourists lifted an ivory comb, sterling pieces. Yes, a working plantation. Slaves were freed in 1834, gradually, indentured, underpaid. When you go out back, careful down these high ancient steps. Don't lean on or touch that spiny tree, same age as the house. Barbs you can't see till they stab you, shadow its bark. Walk through those gates to the barn, the history of machinery used for sugaring. No tips for me on my last day. And here's a device cut in this stone wall, original with the house, yet still, amazingly, useful, as though anything here could be useful. See those hollows in the stone, the curved shapes inside like urns? Rain would seep through successive limestone containers until the planters collected in this lowest one water. Here, sample some. Relieved of its debris, pure as any of us might desire. Okay, this next poem is a poem on one of my husband's abstract drawings. And I saw in this drawing tensions between straight lines and curved lines. The straight lines seem to me to represent the unchangeable and what is rigid, and the more curved lines seem to me to represent what's malleable, what can be changed. And there's also a little figure here in the lower right that came to, a little human figure that looked monastic to me, and that came to mean something to me. But I saw this as both stiff and as something that could change. Okay, so the poem is called Bolted, Riveted. Bolted, riveted. Bolted, riveted, strong in a visual field of diagonal lines. Yes, this is locked from the right, from the left, and by shadows. It's stapled, clamped, stocked, reaffirmed, and geared toward keeping in what's hid, despised, pledged, feared. Through it, too, run grains, a river, screws, that on the other hand could well be loosed, a lever be pulled, a bolt let go a grip. You'd think some kind of power might open up, equip us saints, and draw us to our knees. Okay, and this poem is called Hat. It's a love poem. Hat. Your hand on my forehead is a cloche, high fashion, or tipped to one side, a jaunty beret. On my face, your hand, like a veil, moves with slight changes in the weather. Your hand on my skull is a prayer cap. Okay, and this last poem was written for my sister Carol, and it's called Redeemed Afternoon. She was in her early 80s when I would drive upstate to visit her, and I'd want to talk to her about her health, and about her health, which was beginning to fail, and about was she taking her medicine, and was she eating well, and was she seeing the doctor, and all these things. And she didn't want to talk about those things, and our spirits would sink, and then we were unhappy, and we decided just to get out of the house. And so, Redeemed Afternoon is about a wonderful walk we took in the woods behind her house. Redeemed Afternoon for my sister Carol. After boredom, after quarrels, listing the extent you're taking care of yourself or not, after heels dug in like the only existing part of our body, an actual walk together through your own acres of woods out back, far as we can go along the stony ridges, you with your walking stick in this terrain I'd forgotten, its deep, stream-worn ravines, these lookout heights, slim trees, and exposed white roots. You wished you could record my lying prone on the damp ground, photographing here spring's barely noticeable spot of color, a pair of dog-toothed yellow violets. Okay, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks much. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.